Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which is set to see Lilo and Stitch, most especially, in addition to Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, and a lot of the holdovers from previous weeks, come together to make one of the biggest opening weekends that we've seen in a very long time, especially considering how weak the box office has really been this past year, with a few exceptions, like the Minecraft movie amongst them, Sinners, of course, on its box office tear as well. But it does need to be said that the mainstream media's coverage of this being the biggest ever Memorial Day weekend on record is a bit misleading. Just as always, they are always going to be pushing these numbers out there without adjusting for things like inflation, without considering how much tickets cost today. Keep in mind, right? Films like Lilo and Stitch, films like even The Final Reckoning, are made specifically for big screens like the IMAX showings, big screens like the Dolby Vision showings, the 3D showings, all of the bells and whistles, which means that average ticket price of what's being sold is that much higher than your general audiences. And so though we could say, hey, it's the most money being recorded, right, as it is being released, as far as the actual value of that, as far as the number of people are concerned, no, we're not looking at record-breaking numbers in that regard. Again, I do need to fully break down those numbers, and I'll try and do that in the future. Looking at the domestic box office for Memorial Day weekends to see what actually would have been the biggest on record. But just again, be very careful when it comes to people like Tony and Nancy over at Deadline, because they will push these narratives, because yes, you could argue, okay, it's the biggest number being recorded on this weekend, but again, the value of that dollar is not the same as it was even just a few years ago, and the number of people going to the theater, and that's a big factor, right? Just because you're making a amount of money does not mean that you are actually keeping up with the number of people that you need to sustain your films or to sustain your franchise in the long term, just because your ticket prices are going up, because eventually you're going to get to a point where people are not going to be willing to spend those ticket prices anymore. A lot of people have already fallen into that, and it's kind of this never-ending cycle. Eventually, you're only going to have a few people left, really, and is that really a way to sustain your business model? I personally do not think so. So we'll go ahead and dive into the real numbers of what's going on this weekend, because it's looking really, really good for Lilo and Stitch and really, really bad for The Final Reckoning, and it all comes down not only to opening weekend numbers, but budgets, more so than anything else. And so starting off with Lilo and Stitch from Disney, this film is expected to have a 3-day domestic opening of around $170 million. You heard that right, $170 million just domestically. That means that this movie worldwide is likely going to eclipse the entire box office run of films like Thunderbolts, the entire box office run of things like Captain America: Brave New World in just its opening weekend. That is how powerful this opening is expected to be. The 4-day Memorial Day forecast has it getting up to $215 million. So pretty insane numbers here. This also, of course, is that reminder that Disney has a stranglehold on theaters. It's being released at over 4,400. One of the reasons why Disney, especially as a company, is able to get that many screens is because they basically make theaters given to their demands. This is something that I know, having worked at a movie theater myself and having to have seen their practices behind the scenes, right? As we are getting our schedule set up for the theater, one of the things that always came up was, oh, Disney has a new movie this weekend, and hey, if we want to actually show it at our theater, we got to do this, this, and this, or otherwise we don't get it. And that included having X number of 3D showings, X number of premium format, X number of prime time slots, right, of actual movie times, right, that the 6 to 8 p.m. range of having enough time there. On weekends, of course, having a lot of primetime morning showings too. And if you weren't able to basically get to those demands, you wouldn't be able to actually get the movie itself. And so this is, again, a reminder that Lilo and Stitch is going to benefit from that. Disney's going to benefit from that too. And again, this is kind of the way the business has worked, but people have kind of brought that up from time to time in comment sections and other video channels. And so I wanted to try to explain it as someone who worked in that industry to tell you what exactly that means and what's actually going on there. So it's not like Disney's necessarily doing anything that other companies and other studios wouldn't do. They just happen to be the best at it, air quotes, right? Meaning that they can get the most bang for their buck, but it also means that they're usually the most malicious with that too. So much so that a lot of the single screen theaters, being in New Orleans, especially studios are the theater there called the Britannia, beautiful little single screen theater, actually, had situations where whenever it wanted to get a Disney movie, it had to basically agree with Disney, oh, we're not going to show any other movie for the first 2 weeks. So that limited them just to that one movie. So if the movie was successful, great. If the movie was not successful, okay, they're now holding on to that film for longer than they probably want to. And then they would try to put in some other showings, like midnight showings of other things, like the cult classics and stuff. And they would have to be very careful with how they did that, because if Disney had found out about certain things, or if it didn't go the way that Disney had wanted it to, they could have easily pulled the plug on that. And so again, Disney is pretty well known for those types of practices. But regardless of any of that, Lilo and Stitch as a movie is expected to do bank. And this is especially impressive when the film reportedly only cost $100 million to make. Now, I'm going to obviously hold my breath on that one, because, you know, when it comes down to it, Disney is notorious for lying about their budgets, for putting out false numbers to the mainstream sources in the press. Like we saw this especially with the MCU. You know, it's not nearly as egregious, I think, in some of their other areas and other properties. I've only seen part of Lilo and Stitch as far as like the trailers are concerned and things like that, but it doesn't look like they may have spent too much money on the actual effects for the film. So 100 million could be possible, but if you think about just how much they've spent on all their live action, on all of their animated fare, it just seems very unlikely that all of a sudden this time around they've learned to be frugal with their spending. I don't honestly remember the last time I saw a big tentpole movie only cost $100 million to make. So I'm a little bit skeptical on that. What we do know is that their marketing for this film is off the charts, and so that film at least has $100 million worth of a marketing budget. We can definitely project that for certain. Regardless of any of that, though, no matter how much the film costs, even if the film did cost $200+ million, right now it's on pace to be not only a billion-dollar film, and I think that absolutely is going to happen for this movie, and not too long after its opening, but also it's going to just have a very strong opening, and it's going to make money back in condition with that. So while Lilo and Stitch is in a very good situation, right? It's going to make a lot of money. It's going to make a lot of profit as well, based off of the reports, at least as far as their costs are concerned. The same cannot be said for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. So this opening is pretty abysmal. $65 million for a movie that cost $400 million. Production budget alone around $400 million. Now remember, when Dead Reckoning Part 1 came out a couple years ago, that movie also had a bloated budget. Now they got some of that back because they were able to get insurance claims because of COVID and everything, but it was still a pretty big loss, right? In the $100 million range or so, even with those tax incentives that were put in there, and even with the insurance money that they got. It was a pretty big loss, at least theatrically. One could argue they may have made some of that back on Blu-ray sales, VOD sales, etc., but it's very hard, right, down the line to kind of make that money back up in a short order, especially when you have another film right behind it that costs even more money, $400 million in this case, to make back. This means that this film has to make well over $1 billion just to break even. With an opening weekend of $65 million domestically, I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen, right? As you can see, $81.8 million is what it's expected to do on the 4-day weekend with Memorial Day. This is just abysmal numbers here. Now, what is interesting is that they do have then Final Destination Bloodlines with a 67% drop, so a pretty large drop-off there. Again, not too surprising because of, again, obviously a lot of other films taking up the marketplace there, and also a lot of people probably have wanting to see it opening weekend to not get spoiled on anything. Wanting to pay tribute to the people in the film as well. I think it was Mr. Todd. Again, I forget his full name, but I know it's Tony Todd, I think. He was an actor who had been in the franchise for a long time, who had passed away, so it was his last performance. So maybe some people really want to see it opening weekend. Again, we won't really know for sure until the numbers actually come out. It is interesting because I think there's some discrepancy here with some of the others. So for instance, you have Box Office Report having only a 51% drop being projected for Final Destination, so a pretty strong second weekend hold there. They also have this film coming in above Thunderbolts, and also Sinners being not too far behind. And so what's interesting is that Thunderbolts is expected to almost get a little bit of a lift here because of the Memorial Day weekend. I don't necessarily see that happening, though, because Thunderbolts have just not been performing the way that traditionally people who have been tracking this have been expecting. And so I think that Sinners is going to continue to hold well because, again, it's been consistent in that, whereas Thunderbolts really hasn't been. And so having it a 38% hold is, I think, a bit bold by their standard, whereas Box Office Theory has Sinners taking the edge there with a 28% hold versus Thunderbolts dropping 41%. This seems to be the way in which Thunderbolts has been moving, has been shifting, and so I think Thunderbolts probably will drop closer to the number being reported by Box Office Theory. And yeah, basically it just, once again, will show you how weak Thunderbolts is really doing, especially in comparison to other films like that of Sinners, and also how well Sinners is doing by comparison. It's also expected that Minecraft might get a little bit of a bump from the holiday weekend also, and so it'll be interesting to see exactly where these films fall, you know, whether Final Destination is able to hold off that massive drop-off, right? 16.8 million versus 25 million is a pretty big deal. I still think Bloodlines is going to easily make its money back, though, because it had a pretty modest budget for its size and also had a pretty impressive opening weekend. It's been consistently continuing to make money as the days have gone on as well. As you can see here over on Box Office Pro, they have Lilo and Stitch at 168, 185 million with a 4-day range of 185 to 230 million dollars. So again, pretty insane numbers there. 215, kind of the top end of Box Office Theory. They have the traditional tracking mentioned up here that Lilo and Stitch traditionally, based off of the typical industry standards, people like Tony at Deadline would say 150, 160 million dollars, whereas his tracking has it around 190 to 225. I think I'm much more likely to agree with Box Office Theory. Pro, I think, is also being a bit bullish here, but hey, totally could see it happen. Even though the film, right, so far from people I've heard who have seen it, it's gotten pretty mixed reviews, right? Some people are really liking it. Some people are really not really feeling it, saying, hey, you might as well just watch the original film, regardless of that. I know Jeremy Johns wasn't really as hyped about this one either because it almost like dumbs down the original story and then adds a lot of things for no real reason. And so regardless of any of that, though, it's a kid's movie, right? Just like with Moana 2. Moana 2 wasn't really all that good, right? It wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't great either, and most people probably won't ever watch it again. Yet people still saw it nonetheless, right? It still made over $1 billion, and so that's why I think that's likely what's going to happen with Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch could possibly even be bigger than that of Moana 2. Just because of how big Lilo and Stitch is as an IP, right? It's had a long life after its initial release, many, many years ago. Mission Impossible Final Reckoning is also right now traditional range around 75 million, and Box Office Theory actually has a pretty similar number there, 75 to 85 million over the 4-day frame. So this is really, really bad numbers for them overall. And again, that article from Deadline, make sure you always take it with a giant grain of salt as far as when they say records have been broken, because again, they never adjust for inflation and they just never take into account reality. Now let's go ahead to the charts because we love charts here on OMB Reviews, just to give you an update here on budgets here. So again, the report is Lilo and Stitch only cost $100 million to make. So based off of that, it means typically it would cost or need to make around $300 million or so to break even at the box office. This comes down to the fact that the film had a $100 million budget is what's being reported there. We also know at least $100 million was spent on marketing. Again, they had that big Super Bowl ad we know cost a lot of money. We know also their marketing has been very pervasive for this film too. And Disney in general, when they are spending, or rather when they have a very strong presence with their films, spend at least $100 million on their marketing. Now, this would be a case, though, where, again, $100 million is what you spent to make the movie. Now, Disney is notorious for overspending on pretty much most other things, so it's not that surprising, but we could definitely expect this film to need at least $300 million or more because of that inflated marketing cost there to actually break into the box office. And guess what? It's going to do that in its opening weekend, right? If it's already making $200 million domestically, you're looking at it at least making that much money overseas as well, probably $100 to $200 million at least. So this film likely to be a break even by the end of this weekend based on the numbers that they're giving us. And again, we'll have to wait and see if anything gets reported from that. If Caroline Reed is able to find anything, for instance, as far as actual marketing cost or production cost. But as of right now, it's looking really good for Lilo and Stitch. Can't say the same for Mission Impossible. As you can see here, $1.2 billion. And that's assuming that they have a typical marketing spend and that they make money in the usual places, right? If they're having a much larger international total from this one, guess what? That break-even point gets that much higher. So $1.2 billion is what we're looking at a break-even point. This film, with that kind of opening weekend, it's just not going to hit that mark. It's not going to be able to get there. Remember that the Dead Reckoning Part 1, as it was originally known, now just called Dead Reckoning, only capped out around $500 million plus worldwide. And that film, right, did not get anywhere close to what it needed to do to break even with that massive budget at the time. This one has an even larger budget, and no reports yet of any, tax credits that have not been accounted for or any insurance claims that have not been accounted for yet. Again, those obviously could eventually come in, but as of right now, that's not looking to be the case. And so, yeah, this is looking like a massive loss for them. And if this is the final movie in the franchise, it might be good for them to move on from here, or at the very least to take a hiatus and say, hey, let's go ahead and revamp here. So that way, eventually when we come back, because again, the movie really doesn't end on a final note, I would argue personally. They could probably continue the franchise going forward, whether they will or not. With those kind of losses, you're going to wait at least another 5 years, if anything, less than that, before you start to make anything else into the future. Lilo and Stitch, as I'd mentioned, $300 million there. Bloodlines, again, has been making some pretty good money from its opening weekend. Right now, according to the last update from Box Office Mojo, it's only around $16 million in the red. I think it's going to probably pass that this weekend, depending on, again, how well it holds or doesn't hold. Fight or Flight. This is a film that, again, was actually a lot of fun. I actually got to see this movie finally, and it was a really good time. I gave it a rad score over on Criticlist, and overall, I had a lot of fun with it. Not a lot of people seeing it, so hopefully, if you have time this weekend to go see this movie and you're looking for catching up some things, or maybe next week as some people's summers begin, I would recommend checking that out if you can find a showtime for it, because it's really, really good. Shadow Force, of course, continues to be a flop. Clown the Cornfield continues to make profits. Thunderbolts continues to be a flop as well. As you can see here, only 81% compared to its first 2 weeks. So this film is not tracking really well. This film is going to end towards the lower end of things. And so though I do think there is still a chance, and we'll find out this weekend, right? Memorial Day weekend will be a big make or break for the future of this film, right? I do think it's still tracking well enough to be able to match and maybe even exceed that of Captain America Brave New World. But obviously break even is just no longer on the table for this movie as it's not tracking that well. Until Dawn's finally profitable Accountant is unfortunately not. And Sinners continues to add to its overall profits, having now over doubled its first 2 weeks. This is a very impressive number. Again, that against your first 2 weeks number is always a very good one. So for instance, A Working Man had really good word of mouth, was able to double its amount of money. Same thing happened obviously with Sinners as well. And though one could argue, hey, Thunderbolts seemed to have pretty good word of mouth too, clearly that word of mouth was not very good because this film is just not tracking well enough to be even in the same category as those other two films. But those are the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts? Let me know. Do you think Mission Impossible is going to pull out a miracle and somehow become this global phenomenon? It's too long, right? Having seen the movie myself, I can say it is about a 3-hour movie, and I love the franchise. I liked Dead Reckoning Part 1 quite a bit, but even that film, I was like, all right, the way you released this movie was not smart. The way that you try to, make this movie be too much like I need to do homework to know exactly what's going on and to be able to really appreciate these characters, I think probably hurt the movie quite a bit. That's the same thing that's going on with this movie, but now you have even less people interested because I was not the only person, right, that watched the movie last time. I liked it, but a lot of people didn't, right? So though a lot of people did like that last movie, a lot of people also didn't. And so when you're asking them to spend 3 hours of their life going to see a movie that is very bloated as far as its story is concerned, and though it does feature the best action sequences that I've ever seen, I mean, him on a plane going upside down and all the crazy insanity, amazing. Tom Cruise, you're a mad lad, and I'm going to praise you for that, and I'm going to say people, hey, probably should go ahead and support the movie just for that alone, just for the stunt team, and just for the work that went into the movie. Doesn't necessarily mean, though, that that movie is going to be well worth watching after the fact, multiple times over, or anything like that. And so, again, Final Reckoning, overall, not that great of a film, and I think that's going to hurt its box office, too. So let me know your thoughts on that. Do you think it's going to make money? Do you think it's going to probably lose a lot of money? Right now, I'm thinking it's going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars, unfortunately. Hopefully it does well, but again, I would also understand why it wouldn't do well. Also, thoughts on Lilo and Stitch. Have you seen it? Is it any good? Would you say, I might as well just go watch the original instead? Again, because I heard that there are various changes that happen to this one, and it's something that I know a lot of us are just kind of over with at this point of like, why do you have to keep changing this nonsense over and over again? If you're just going to call it Lilo and Stitch, make us Lilo and Stitch. Don't make us Lilo and Stitch in an alternate universe, which is essentially sometimes how they do and handle these live action, quote, adaptations, etc. So thoughts on those or anything else I mentioned in the comment section below, let me know. If you like this video, smash that like button, loud that fire button over on Odyssey if you were still watching over there. However, I don't upload any of over there, so I'm just going to keep this in because, hey, we do it live, and that's what keeps it real and authentic. Make sure you smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of every day, a blessed Friday. Summertime is upon us, everybody. And as always, God bless. Now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. Also a huge shout out to my newest YouTube member, Raichu. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy, shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started, and also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.